The projects have a start date and end date. Lean doesn't stop, right? Continuous improvement doesn't stop. When we get one done, we're going on to the next thing. It's a culture investment you're doing. If you have a lean culture, you don't have to look at outside.
Mm.
You are building these from within. You are empowering people to make decisions. The people who should be making decisions are the people closest to the work.
Welcome to KPI Fireside. Our mission is simple: to improve companies and to improve careers through continuous improvement. In every episode, we explore the spark, the moment, the mindset, or the method that ignites real change. Whether you're just starting out or leveling up, you'll find the insights and inspiration to fuel your next improvement. Welcome back to KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. I am your host, Keith Norris. Our guest today is Nick Belcher. Nick is a certified Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt from Villanova University and the head of continuous improvement at Carrier Enterprises, a wholesale distributor of HVAC equipment parts and supplies. Nick has brought his experience from Toyota Manufacturing, Indiana, to introduce a lean culture to Carrier. Nick has spearheaded the Lean Six Sigma certifications and personally trained over 150 associates from white to black belts. Nick always places the focus on people and culture over tools or projects to ensure that lean remains a sustainable force for continuous improvement. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Keith, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite.
You bet. You bet. I'm excited to have a little conversation with you. I know that for a lot of people that are interested in this lean continuous improvement discipline, the Toyota represents like the gold standard. So folks that have actually worked inside there always have an interesting perspective. And, I was looking at some of the things that you have listed in your background. I know you've noticed that you've worked at a number of very high volume process type organizations. So why don't we start out by having you tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got to this point? Tell us how you got started.
Well, you mentioned Toyota, and that's really where my lean journey had started. But in hindsight, I didn't know my lean journey started with Toyota, because when you get with Toyota manufacturing, everyone associates that with lean. And people have asked me, like, well, did you have like a lot of lean training? I was like, well, apparently, but it's just a Toyota way. I didn't know it was lean. I didn't know what it was called. It was just, this is how we do business, and this is the people we have. This is the way we work every single day. It's just embedded in their culture. It wasn't until years later, after I left Toyota and started applying some of the basic principles that I had learned, that they said, oh, well, you must have a lean background. I was like, well, I came from Toyota, if that's the same thing. But it took me years and years of going through different companies and different positions to really understand that, oh, I do have a lean background. And it was probably when I started getting formal education outside of Toyota that I was like, ah, there's my spark. I know what this is.
Yeah, you have an interesting background. As I mentioned, you've got some companies that I'm sure everybody's familiar with. You've got the experience at McDonald's as a manager. Tell us how that started.
Yeah. So every company I worked for, I ended up getting in management, and McDonald's was, I believe I was 16 years old when I started for that company. I think the minimum wage was maybe around $4 an hour, 4.25. So that's where I started. And for that company, initially, my motivation was like, well, I need to make more money. What can I do other than asking for extra shifts? So I believe it was my senior year of high school. As I was heading into college, I got promoted to a shift manager. So I was coming in either at 4 o'clock in the morning before I would go to school, or 4 p.m. right after school, and working till 1 o'clock in the morning. But that's really when I got my first steps into leadership, which was one of the more challenging, because when you're at that age, you're learning for the first time how to lead, but you're leading your friends. You're
Yeah.
you're 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 leading people you go to school with, or people that are 20, 30 years older than you are. So that was really kind of just thrown into the deep end and try to figure out. But yeah, that was fast paced. I always feel everyone should, at some point go do fast food. That gives you definitely a respect for people that maybe you don't get from other type of jobs. Same thing with Walmart, right?
Yeah.
After McDonald's, when I went into college, I went to work for Walmart. Massive company, impressive company. And if you can do customer service at Walmart, I think you can do it anywhere in the world. And I was able to get into management there as well. I worked in their automotive section, so changing tires and oil and batteries and in their working nights throughout college as a supervisor there at Walmart as well.
That's so interesting. And you had some military experience also, National Guard.
Yes, so I joined Army National Guard when I was, since 1996, 97, somewhere in there when I was back then. I don't know if they do it today, but they had a split option where you could join your junior year of high school. So I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, my career. I didn't have any money. Military can definitely help with that.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me guidance and the initial discipline that I didn't have before. So I went to basic training after my junior year of high school in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, then finished high school, and then it was AIT in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, before I was able to use that to go to college and actually pay for the bulk of my university.
That's so interesting. One thing I find interesting about that is it's a very relatable experience. A teenager just getting a job basically anywhere that'll pay, it's fast food, probably didn't have like big aspirations of climbing the corporate ladder there necessarily. But as opposed to, let's say, getting a lawn mowing job or something where you're just using your dad's lawnmower, perhaps, you were in an organization that had McDonald's, Walmart, and even the military often, they're very good examples of a high degree of operational precision in all of those industries. So what I hear in your story is this idea that might be labeled as growth mindset, somebody who really craves, is very interested in growing themselves, maximizing their potential, and just finding ways to do that. And that can manifest in so many different ways in life. Definitely in our professional careers is certainly a way to do that. So at some point you had the opportunity to go work at Toyota, and you said when you started there you didn't realize that Toyota was this like, you know, big deal and continuous improvement. It was just a job. How did you come across that job?
Yeah, so this is I went to school in Evansville, Indiana, which is maybe the second largest city in Indiana, next to Indianapolis, which everything else is a small town. And I lived in one of those small towns, maybe 8,000 people, Princeton, Indiana. And I got out of college, got my undergrad, and I wasn't really willing or able to move at that time. And if you look at the job opportunities with a 4-year degree, there wasn't much. Bristol Myers is probably one of the bigger employers. Whirlpool had just left to Monterey a couple years before that. And so the other employers that paid good, which is, I was 22 years old, that was a big motivator, was either coal mining or Toyota.
Interesting.
And the coal miners respect that job like crazy, but that was not for me. I was not going to live underground. And Toyota was newer. And I remember going to the grocery store or Walmart or somewhere and seeing people come in with their Toyota uniforms on. And in a small town, it was like, wow, they took so much pride, not just from going to work, but they would wear that uniform everywhere. It was just it looked like somewhere where I wanted to be. And really the motivation was that will change my life. And it did. I mean, working Walmart back 2002, I was a manager making $10 an hour. And to get on a Toyota was $17 an hour. And at 22, 23 years old, that money doesn't even make sense to me at that age. They went through their hiring process, which is the most rigorous thing. It was easier to get into the military than it was to get on Toyota.
Really? What
Yeah,
was
there's
that
a
process like? How many
yeah, so
rounds of interviews and whatnot?
several before you can get to an interview. So there is a personality type assessment. So you go and you take all these tests to see if you're a good fit for their culture, which is that's everything I learned from about Toyota is like it's not about lean, it's about the culture, it's about the people. And so they want to make sure you're a good fit for the culture of that company first. If you pass that phase, you're put in this bank of people trying to get on with that company, and it can take 6 months to a year just to get a phone call. After that phase, if you pass that, you're sent for a 2-day assessment, and This is more of a not an interview, it's more of a tryout. So we went to an assessment center, and they're basically trying to figure out if you can follow standard work, follow instructions. So I'm putting lug nuts on wheels. I'm running wiring harnesses. I've never done it before. No one had, but they're seeing if you can follow the instructions that you're given, and they would put you in different stress environments and put you on a clock, and they're talking tack time and stuff like that, and you don't know what's going on.
And I'm
But they're
assuming
seeing
that
if you
you've
can
got like
follow.
standard work that you're working from, like here, they put you in front of it and say, can you, here's the instructions, follow it.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so they're timing you. So instinct might be just to go as fast as you can and ignore the instructions. But the people that followed the instruction that delivered something quality, the time didn't matter as much because they knew you weren't trained. So those are the first kind of couple steps. You had to pass the written test, pass a physical assessment, and then you did a real physical where you go and you've got to do a strength test. You got to pass a regular physical for your health. I remember there was a lung capacity test that you had to go through. And like I said, it was easier to get in the military than it was that test. And what I learned years later is the better job you did at that physical test, the harder job you got when you earned your spot at Toyota.
Really?
Absolutely. So if you were in good shape and you were flexible and nimble and then maybe the right physical stature, that kind of positioned you for that type of job you would get in the
So interesting.
manufacturing environment. So
I'm
in
curious.
hindsight, maybe I should have slacked off a little bit.
You look like a strong guy. I'm sure you did pretty well in that part of the test.
I lasted as long as I could. Yeah.
I'm curious about like the psychological or psychographic parts of that. I mean, again, maybe at the time you didn't recognize what they were doing. Maybe since then you've kind of learned, but how much of what they were testing for was maybe what we might call values or beliefs or mindset or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think the entire thing was that. So from the written exam, they want to test your ability to learn, to be coachable. I think with Toyota, they believe that leaders are born, but they have to be developed. Read several books about the Toyota way and how they look at their leaders, and they're like, yeah, there's natural inherent characteristics of a true leader, but that's not enough. You're not just born a leader and then you go lead. Your environment shapes you and the people shape you, and that's what Toyota invests in. And I think it's what they're looking for, even in those early aptitude tests. That does this person show the ability to be coached? Can they follow basic instruction? Are they open-minded? Are they looking for alternative solutions to different ideas? Do they have the ability to adapt to change under stressful environments? And you have to have those things working for a company like Toyota, because if you enjoy comfort, you may not last very long.
And there's something interesting about just the continuous improvement discipline growth mindset is you really do have to occasionally like lean into a challenge. And there is this like tension of the natural man, you might call it, of like taking things easy. I think that it's not
Hmm.
necessarily natural to like challenge ourselves and push ourselves. And so I think that's where structure sometimes can help that. So we went through this testing process. They tested thinking skills, problem solving skills, even physical and lung capacity. That's
Hmm.
so interesting. And then how long did that hiring process take, did you say?
It was probably about 18 months from the time I filled out an application to the time I started. And even then, they had what they called a variable workforce. So I wasn't even full-time Toyota. It was I say a temp agency, but it was a temp agency with full benefits and insurance and everything. So that was a requirement at that time for the company. And you were in that position for 2 years before you could be hired full-time
So it was like
for
kind of
Toyota.
an extended like trial period to see if they really
Hmm.
liked. Yeah.
It also gave the company flexibility. So, and I'll get to this in a second, but Toyota is layoffs of employees is against the company culture. I believe, and someone could correct me if they comment after this. I believe they've had one major layoff in their history, and the CEO resigned after that because it was a failure
Deal.
to the everything the company stands for. And so they had this buffer for a while. And when the Great Recession hit, those were the only team members that were impacted was the variable workforce. All the full-time team members kept their jobs.
So I think what I hear you saying is that that program that you got in part of was a way to create additional capacity, a variable capacity above like their full-time, kind of like their regular
Right.
staff.
So Toyota has to be flexible because they work on a pull system, which is,
Hmm.
a lean term where they build based on customer orders. So what the dealer network is buying, they will build the vehicles to support that, not where they're, like the big three, which I used to write all kinds of papers in my MBA program on them. They would use a push, like we're going to build 150,000 F-150s. It's your job to sell it.
Yeah,
Where Toyota would work the other way. It's like, what do your customers want? We will build to
we're
that, and
doing
then they
that.
can ramp production up and down. And same thing with having a flexible workforce, they can do the same thing.
That makes a lot of sense. So in that process, I mean, you learned a lot of things, and as you moved on to other companies, you said that while you were going through it, it wasn't necessarily like you were learning the mechanics of the system the way outsiders might describe it. It was just
Mhm.
it was just like a fish in water. You were just there. What were some of the other things that you have probably since discovered were unique about working at Toyota that maybe you took for granted or didn't realize were unique for that company?
Sure. Well, the first job I took outside of Toyota was a company called Goodman Distribution that later got bought by Daikin, which was another Japanese owned company. So I got to go from a Japanese manufacturer to another Japanese manufacturer within a few short years. But it was a branch manager training program. And they found me unique because I kept asking why. So they was like, well, here's how we do this job. And I was like, well, why do we do this? And initially they thought I just didn't know. And I was just new and I was asking just so they could tell me. But I was asking why because that's what we did at Toyota. If something didn't make sense and I needed to understand why that was the most efficient way to do the process. I kept asking why. And initially, after a while, I've been there for several months, we're like, okay, this guy is going to keep asking why until we give him better answers. And it gave me opportunities working because the first job was to go in a warehouse and learn to drive a forklift and to work in a warehouse distribution kind of area. And I started 5Sing. I started looking, I'm like, well, every time I jump on a forklift, I've got to go to the other end of the building to charge it. What if we park the forklift closer to the chargers and move some of this racking out of the way so we save all those steps? And initially it's just one distribution center. Like, well, I guess that could save a little bit of time. But we start sharing that information over time. And it's like, well, if we did this everywhere, it would save quite a bit of steps. So really is initially just asking why and being curious as to why we did it this same way for a very long time. And then as I got the opportunity to train other people in that company, I would help set up their warehouses and say, well, we should tape this aisle here and make sure that the HVAC equipment, so make sure the furnaces or the air conditioners don't go past this line. Because if they go past this line, it means you got some overstock, or at a minimum, you've created a safety issue. And I think that's some of the initial stuff I didn't even know until people asked me, like, where did you get this from? And I was like, well, I guess Toyota maybe.
Do you recall, like at Toyota, you get trained, they probably tell you all this stuff, like, how you should look for opportunities to improve, but was there some specific behaviors? Like, were you asked a question, or did you observe somebody doing this in a way that maybe in hindsight you realized that, that was actually a behavior that you learned from?
Sure, there's a couple things. So when I initially started with the company, learning how I was on the assembly line in what they call Trim 1. So the Toyota Tundra Sequoia SUV, and you got to follow standard work. And then one of the jobs I had was installing airbag sensors, very important. And if you messed up, people quickly
Yeah.
noticed, right? So when I would mess up, because when I was training, part of the coaching they would do, I would be pulled to the side by my team leader or group leader. The coaching process went through the 5 whys. It was like, okay, well, let's figure out why this happened because they want to make sure that it's either a person issue or a process issue. And most of the time for me, it was I wasn't following standard work. But they're trying to eliminate that. They're like, well, you didn't follow standard work. There's a coaching opportunity here. So the 5 whys was something I learned quickly, not because I wanted to, but because like if I messed up, I knew that as part of the coaching process, they would go through the 5 whys to figure out what I messed up. The other part was, which I got to be a part of for a while, they had Kaizen teams. And
Kaizen
to be
teams.
part of the Kaizen department was great because it got you off the assembly line for a few hours a day. But I would watch these folks come out to the line, and when production would need to speed up or slow down based on demand, these people will come out and they're measuring steps between the truck to the tools, and they're helping rewrite the work instructions, and they're going to the people that are doing that job, asking them questions like, hey, what's the biggest pain point for you? What slows you down when you do this every single day? What just irritates you about this process? And they're trying to eliminate that waste, either speed it up or balance the workload if they've got to maybe slow down the line because maybe you're not going to build 400 trucks a shift. It's going to be 375. But that was really where I saw that process improvement happening all the time was either there was a quality issue that stood out and they're trying to eliminate that or put a poke yoke in place, or just ramping up and down with the demand of the customer to come and either speed the process up or balance it out.
Nick, you used one of these jargon terms that we use sometimes on this podcast. I like to try to explain them when we get a chance. If they're not super commonly used, like poke yoke. Could you explain what
Mhm.
poke yoke is for anybody that might not be familiar?
There's the examples I use when I'm training a lot, and you see a lot in automobiles. In today's automobile, to start your vehicle, you usually got to put your foot on the brake pedal. That's a poke yoke. And maybe a manual transmission, if those still exist, you have to put your foot on the clutch and the brake pedal. And the reason for that is if you remember before they had those poke yokes, you could jump in a manual transmission and start it and the car would move.
Search for.
It would just take off, right? If it was in gear. Other ones that are very simple would be it's to prevent an error from happening or mitigate it. So you can't plug an HDMI cable into a USB. It doesn't physically fit, so it prevents that mistake from happening. But it's anything that mitigates that. Maybe to keep you from running off the road. We got stuff in the cars that maybe sense that now, but there's also rumble strips that are an audio something you hear and
Yeah.
like, okay, I better pull over. But that's what a poke yoke. It's mistake proofing is the concept for poke yokes.
So those are some really great examples. Thanks for sharing that. So as you left Toyota, you went to these other companies, and now you're into, you're not just a team member, but you're involved in helping teach and train this continuous improvement stuff. You mentioned the term Kaizen teams. Is that's the term that was used at
At
Toyota?
Toyota,
And
yes, and
were you a part of one of those teams at Toyota?
yes, I got to be part of a Kaizen team, and then later I went to one of their suppliers and helped. Toyota is, if they can't control the quality in their own factory, they will also control the quality for their suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
So Toyota will either buy their suppliers or they will put their people in there. And I had a chance to do that with Toyota Buchuku, which was right down the street. So I got to do some quality sort type work for that company and do some process improvement there as well. So it's all Kaizen, just finding ways to improve the process either for quality or speed.
I think that's interesting. And I've heard similar stories told on the podcast where I asked the question, how did you get your introduction to this discipline? And somebody would say, I worked at a company and one of our important customers told us, hey, you need to put a black belt on this issue. And so we had to go figure out what it was to what a black belt was. And that was their introduction. They were told by an important, relationship, customer supplier, that they needed to do something. And
And honestly, I knew what a black belt was, but it wasn't until I had the role I have today where I was really clicked that, oh, this is what I'm doing.
interesting.
Right. So the whole concept of a black belt, I just thought of an engineer
I
until
see.
I started
So
taking
you had
formal
been around them,
education.
you'd kind of seen what they did, but maybe didn't quite have like the complete picture of the work that they're doing.
Yeah, at Toyota, there's no belts.
Yeah.
It's continuous improvement, it's process improvement. There's not this hierarchy of belts. It's just what they do. So I never saw it because after I left Toyota, I went to wholesale distribution. I left manufacturing, and in distribution at that time, now it's more common. You didn't have a lot of Six Sigma type environment around, so we didn't have any black belts.
So what are some of the things that when you went to the other organizations, you realized were missing and you thought, okay, I got to put this in place?
Yeah, so I'll talk about my with my current company. I got involved with a project, and the project was training related, and I was seen as a person at the time. I was an ops director in South Texas, out of Houston, that was good at training. And so I took my experiences from Toyota, implemented some lean practices, but they just saw I was good at training. And the ask was we need to develop an onboarding program for warehouse associates and distribution associates for the company. And so the company had a lot of training that was very regionalized. And most of the training came just from another person. It wasn't standard, and they needed someone to help with that. So it was really my first opportunity to do a project, and the project team was maybe 50 team members on it, and I was leading it. And I never ran a project like that. I'd always done continuous improvement, but never run a project of that scale. And the lesson I got from that, and along with some other associates, even though we were successful, I was like, there's got to be a better process for this, because I was just on calls and we got the stuff done, but I was like, this needs structure.
This was a
And
training process.
yeah, it was a training process to say we have gaps. We did some voice of the customer type stuff, even though I didn't want to call that. I did some interviews and some focus groups with associates that had left the company and current associates. Like, what is the gap? What do you need from this company? And like, well, we have good safety training, but we don't have really good training for what we do on the job outside of someone coming and training me. And they're just going to train me their habits, whether they be good or bad. But there's nothing written. There's
Is
nothing
this like work
online.
instructions, standard work
Work
type?
instructions, online training, orientation types of, like, I came from Toyota, the orientation was 2 weeks. And this company orientation was like a lot of companies, watch the safety video and get out there and sink or
And then
swim,
just go,
right?
yeah, like learn by tribal knowledge, watch somebody until you can do
Right.
it.
And tribal knowledge is good if the tribal knowledge comes from an expert that's really good at that.
Yeah.
But otherwise you just pick up maybe some of their bad habits. So we developed all this training, which it worked, but it just seemed chaotic. And I was searching for some type of structured process to go from, here's the problem, how do we get to a solution? How do we make sure it stays that way? And we had a new VP and a senior vice president come to the company who came from a company called Fastenal, and they had a relationship with Villanova University, and they had a ton of black belts.
Okay.
And he became a mentor to me, and he said, what you probably need in this was Lean Six Sigma to follow a DMAIC process. I'm like, well, I don't know what that is. Even though I came from Toyota, those terms didn't make sense to me. And so myself and 4 other team members from that group, we said, well, let's go learn. Let's learn how, when we have future projects, how to do it in a structured manner. Because some people used agile, it was all different languages on how to run a project. Nothing was very well documented. So you fix a problem, then a year later, the problem's back. Like, why does that happen? So 4 of us enrolled with Villanova University to take our first, I think it was yellow belt at the time.
And this was like a company sponsored
Yes.
attendance at this Villanova program.
Yeah, we showed success in the first project, and then we said, we want to do more. We're passionate about doing this. This was successful. We think we can do it better. And all of us had full-time jobs, but they knew that we wanted to do this. And we had an SVP that was like, yeah, we should do this program. And our current president is a graduate of Villanova University.
Okay.
So that definitely did not hurt things at the time.
I love hearing stories of companies that support the education and training, particularly in a specific discipline. It reminds me of the meme or the cartoon where the CEO and the CFO are saying, "Hey, what if we pay to train these people and they leave?" And then, the other one says, "What if we don't train them and they stay?"
Yeah. It's one of my favorite quotes, because I've always been about training, and I still have that, right? And we've had people that have left, that have got a certification, and they left, and it's easy to focus on the negative. I'm like, yeah, we might have lost 5 people, but I got 100 someone that are doing the work every day.
Is there, again, I'm not, this is a best practice that I've heard other companies. I know that one of our previous podcast guests worked at a company that had a very formal relationship with, I believe it was the University of Wisconsin, and a program that they had was similar. Is it Carrier that has this relationship with Villanova, or was it a previous company?
It's and I'll specify, it's Carrier Enterprise. So Carrier Manufacturing is an owner of us.
I see. Okay.
It's a joint venture between Carrier Manufacturing and Watsco. So Carrier Enterprise didn't have any relationship whatsoever. So that was created at this time, I think, in 2021.
So you were involved in seeing a need to get some of this, most training that a university is going to provide is going to be, let's say, I don't want to use the word generic in a bad way, but it's going to
Hmm.
be like, this is what Lean Six Sigma is. It's going to be very broadly applicable.
Yes.
but it's going to help teach a common language. The because when you're using the same words, you said a minute ago, in if you're trained at Toyota and then you're working with somebody who is trained in Agile, you might think that you guys don't know how to work the same. But if you
Mhm.
can figure, the more, I think I've heard, like, the more languages you learn, the easier it is to learn more. Like, you realize that they're kind of similar in certain ways.
I've heard that. I'm still struggling to learn Spanish, but my wife
Yeah, I'm
knows
right there
English,
with you.
Spanish, and she knows some French, so it's worked for her. But yes, that was so with Villanova, they do a really good job of because the hardest part with Lean, training someone in Lean Six Sigma that's not in manufacturing is overcoming that part where this is just a manufacturing process, not for, but they do a good job of giving examples in transactional type environments like what I'm in now. But you have people from wholesale distribution, manufacturing, healthcare. So they do a good job of recruiting and setting up their classes with a very diverse type of group. At the same time, while that worked originally, it's also the reason I started teaching myself so I can customize all the classes to specifically for our company.
You know what's funny about this idea of culture that I've observed in talking to people? The things that are unique about an individual company's culture, they always are a little bit cheesy if you look
Hmm.
at them from the outside, but internally they have like this meaning. And I think that's kind of like the telltale sign of something that is part of what you might describe broadly as like the culture. Like, it's something that has meaning to a specific group of people that might be misinterpreted by others.
Right. And culture is the most important thing with Lean, and it's the hardest thing to accomplish. A lot of people I work with now, they say, "Well, you work for Toyota. Can you share some of those tools so we can get some quick wins?" I'm like, it's not the way it works. Even when I said I created my job description, I still had to interview for the role and show the value of the role. And I was asked, "Well, what do you do when the projects are done?" I was like, "What do you mean? This is not a the projects have a start date and end date. Lean doesn't stop. Like continuous improvement doesn't stop. When we get one done, we're going on to the next thing. It's a culture investment you're doing. If you want me to have this title, you're investing in a new culture with the company, not in new tools. Tools are great. They help you get the job done and get the project complete and prove that you made an improvement, but that's not what makes it sticky. That's not what empowers employees to want to keep doing it. Otherwise, it's just more work. If it's just
Oh,
more work, the
yeah.
people that volunteer earlier, eventually they're going to stop volunteering. But if people don't see it as more work, it's just the way they go at work and visualize, hey, how can I make this process better? Then that's where you got the culture piece in. And that's the hardest part, and that's a longer term investment.
What you mentioned as part of your story how much time Toyota took at vetting the candidates, and talking to a lot of experts. I've heard phrases like hire slow, make sure that you get the right people in the door. Cause it's really another one that stuck with me that I like was, you don't have to teach a baby shark how to bite. Like, if you hire the right people that have the right mindset, some of the things that are probably the hardest to train are like things that you don't have to train. And I hear you using the word culture and describing maybe things like mindset or values. Do you use words like that to describe the thinking process that you learned at Toyota? Or, I mean, obviously you were just kind of like a natural fit because you made it through the door to work there. But in retrospect, are there like things that you could describe as values or like hiring values that somebody might try to look for to make sure that this lean thing can work in their organization well?
I think it all starts with the hiring process and you're looking for people that you're going to invest in. And when you have a leader, if they're going to follow lean, they've got to be a person that leads by example. And I don't mean just by doing the right things all the time. They have to be on the floor and they have to know the job that their associates or team members are also performing. And not just the job. If you've got a company with core values, that's something that was big on Toyota. It's not just your performance, it's how are you adhering to those core values of the company? How do you exemplify? How do you pass that down to the people that report to you? I don't think Toyota's ever had a company president in any position that didn't come from within Toyota. They don't go outside. And that's what a lean culture drives from. You don't have to go outside. A lot of companies think, like you mentioned, a black belt, like, well, we got this problem, we should go hire a black belt. If you have a lean culture, you don't have to look at outside. You are building these from within. You are empowering people to make decisions. The people who should be making decisions are the people closest to the work. if you have the brass in the ivory tower making all the decisions and they don't know how the job is done daily, how do you know you're making a right decision? To me, there's always the job is done different ways. You have what's written down in an SOP or work instructions. You have maybe you've seen it before and you think you know what it is. And then there's a job that's actually being done by the people doing the work. And if you're going to do a process improvement, you go to Gemba and see how they're doing the job. And you measure off of that, not what's written down or what you think you have in your head. So I think it all starts with empowering other people to make decisions for improvement.
How do you define, I'll use kind of like a dramatic example. I'm working on the line, I'm putting lug nuts on a tire or whatever, and I decide, hey, I'm tired of building this Tundra. We should build like a Jeep looking vehicle. I'm going to start building a Jeep looking vehicle, right? Like there's things that are within your span of control, like within your decision making authority. And then there's things that are like, well, we probably ought to involve somebody else in that decision. How do you explain those levels or zones to somebody with that
Sure.
idea of,
And I have this a lot with my when I'm training someone. There's difference between empowerment and authority, right? So when I say empowerment, I mean don't be afraid to question why. And if there's a better way to do it, let's trial that. It doesn't mean try it by yourself in a vacuum. It's like go talk to your supervisor, your group leader, depending on your environment, and say, I think I have this idea. Empowerment is like, I have an idea, and empowerment is having a structure that says we're going to listen to those ideas. So we have in our distribution centers people that post ideas. And it's part of their leader's job to go review those ideas and evaluate those and get an A3 document maybe and put it in. It's like, hey, we're going to try this. We're going to see if it works. And if it works, we're going to share it. That's what I mean by empowerment. It's not to go rogue and just go completely on here because we see that. Like, we'll
yeah,
go and I'll say, not that you're doing anything wrong, but why are you doing it this way? Like, well, it's faster. I'm like, well, you want to share why it's faster, how it's faster? Maybe we can rewrite the work instructions as long as you're not creating a poor quality or an unsafe environment. Well, empowerment is being employees feeling safe to question the process and
I
then
love
having
that.
support of leadership to try it.
Feeling safe to question the process. I think that's an interesting topic because I'm sure we're not the only two people that have ever stumbled with how do you bridge this gap between empower innovation and continuous improvement, but also work from the standard work, right? Like, do I do it the way it's written or do I
Hmm.
innovate and try something new? I think that can be kind of challenging sometimes for people to pursue two things that seem like they're in conflict, but you know,
The way I try to explain it is like a work instruction is the best way we can do this job right now. It's not the best way forever. It's the
I like
best
that.
known way to do the job right now, which opens up for interpretation. Like, well, potentially there's a better way to do it. And that's what I asked from the people that go through the program. I was like, if there's a better way to do it, raise up your ideas and let's document, let's prove it. And if it is, we will all do it.
That's so good. In terms of, it's often said that you can't just copy the tools that Toyota does. It's a culture. I'm curious if there's like behavioral patterns or rituals that can be distilled, maybe with some reasons why they're done, but what are some of those
Mhm.
behavior patterns or rituals?
So one of the easiest rituals to pick up, and it's also a cornerstone of Toyota, and it hits so many different things, is we would start our shift and we would do a couple of things. We would stretch, which is important for that type of work, right? But we'd also have a discussion. So we would talk about what happened yesterday. What were some of the quality issues or a safety issue that happened the day before or the shift before? So you're communicating to the entire team. You're level setting the entire team. And then also stretching it and getting ready for that day. But I think any company could start that. A lot of times employees they get frustrated with we don't know what leadership is doing. We're not in the know. And emails, communication like that can I mean, how many emails do you get a day? Which ones mean the most? What means the most to me is when someone's in front of me telling me. And if you cascade that information down and you start every shift every day with just 5 minutes of this is what happened today, yesterday, this is what we're looking for today to watch out for, and this is some plans maybe for tomorrow. It only takes 5 minutes, but level sets the entire team members. That's something Toyota did every shift, and we use it with our company minimally for at least for safety, right? To have a safety talk, but to talk about opportunities for improvement, to share ideas, get everyone together. That's one I think can be mimicked with almost
How do you
any
guys refer
organization.
to that in your company playbook or standard work? Is that like stand up, safety meeting,
Stand
daily
up,
huddle? Stand up. Call it a stand up. Okay.
call it
Great.
stand up. But I
Yeah.
think that that's a very easy one to do. That a lot of the other ones with Toyota are hard. And that's why no one is Toyota, and no one should try to be Toyota. I say you can't copy the tools, you can't copy the culture either. And why would you? Your culture is not going to be Toyota. You're not building Toyotas, right? You've got to find what has worked for Toyota and make it work for your company. Take what works and scrap the rest. And that's hard for companies that just want to copy the tools.
Are you struggling to ignite real change in your continuous improvement program? Firestarter is your field guide. Real stories, proven strategies, no fluff. Get it now on Amazon. That's so good, Nick. I'd like to move into a little section we call the rapid fire. These are just kind of short questions, quick answers, kind of finish the sentence sort of thing. The most important job of a leader is to
Teach,
teach.
right? You got to teach your if you're a leader and your people aren't learning, what are you leading? Are you leading just for yourself and for your own pride or for your own ego, or are you building people?
Love that. I love that. Do you have a favorite? Well, I'll start by saying I know it's not all about the tools, but do you have a favorite go-to problem-solving tool or visual device?
Yeah, the first one I'll use with any SOP we write or any type of project comes my way is I ask people to give me a process map.
Process
A
map.
process map does so many things for you. It gives you an idea of what you're even looking at or what you're trying to solve, but also helps identify the scope of the project. And if you don't have the scope nailed down, that project can get way out of control really fast. Or maybe sometimes we don't even do the project because it's too small in scope. But a lot of people, when they're trying to solve a problem, if they just write down the steps in the process so everyone can see, that helps quite a bit. And the other is probably just a couple tools going through the 5 whys or just 5S. 5S we use everywhere. The biggest thing is I ask people is like, do you guys do 5S? I'm like, oh yeah, we do that. And I'll ask, like, no, you do three. 3S is easy. But how do you standardize, how you sustain, make sure you don't go back? I think if we learn a process map and we use 5S simple tools like that to make sure that whatever we improve stays improved, I think those two are probably my go-tos.
That's a good one. Is there a book that you recommend for somebody interested in this topic?
Yeah, I'm going to be biased because it's Toyota, but the Toyota Way to Lean Leadership. So there's the Toyota Way, which is really good, to get some manufacturing sense of how Toyota got there. But the Toyota Way to Lean Leadership is going to teach you that leadership piece, that culture piece, how they invest over decades into their leaders to make sure they have that culture sustain and keep Toyota where they're at.
Good. Um, Finish this sentence. Continuous improvement is.
Employee empowerment.
Love it. Do you have a favorite question?
Favorite questions? Yeah, my favorite question is gonna be why. That's something I ask
Yeah.
all the time. The example I give, because I'm like, that's it, and that's employee empowerment, right? Giving people the opportunity to say why. And the analogy I give people, they're like, well, what do you mean the 5 whys? What is why? I'm like, you ever had a little kid, a little toddler that asks a question because they're generally curious? And that's what 5 whys is, because they're going to keep asking you why till you satisfy them eventually, or you get frustrated and walk away. So for me, if you're going to go into lean, you better be okay and keep a safe environment to be able to ask why.
Yeah, I think I heard the other day somebody quoted something like curiosity will get you further than ambition or something, like just
Well, I like that.
being genuinely curious will take you so far.
Right.
Is there something that you believe that others might disbelieve, something that's been useful in the way you think about culture or leadership?
Well, I want to put it down. There's a belief that Lean Six Sigma, for one, is too rigid, that it slows things down. And there's another quote you hear a lot, and Amazons in the world use this a lot, and it's a bias for action. And people believe that a bias for action and lean as a systemic methodology to problem solving are, they don't complement each other. And it's not true. You can have a bias for action while also measuring and understanding what the problem you're trying to solve. You could jump to a solution and then put band-aids on it for 2 years, or you can take the time to plan now and fix it right the first time.
That's a good answer. Thanks, Nick. Okay, and finally, what's something that you are most fired up or excited about?
I think the opportunity with AI to speed up our problem solving there's all kinds of tools out there because most of the problems you have in an organization have probably been solved somewhere else, but you just don't have access or you haven't
Hmm.
had access or you go online and you would do a search and research other companies to see how they dealt with that. AI can just give you that quickly, where you don't have to reinvent the wheel every single time you have a problem. Most problems are not unique to an organization. It's probably solved somewhere else. So use AI as a tool and don't be afraid of it, right? Use it, and people that jump on AI early are going to be the ones that stick around.
Well, Nick, I really appreciate the conversation. We've had a lot of really interesting, great stuff here. We could probably talk for hours about some of these things. It's a super
Absolutely.
interesting journey that you've been in. And I thank you so much on behalf of myself and our audience for sharing some of these lessons and insights and giving us a little glimpse into what it was like at Toyota and some of these other organizations and how you've chose to adopt those in your current organization. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak.
You bet. If anybody's interested in connecting with you, can we find you on LinkedIn? Is that
Yeah, it's the
another?
best way. I share a lot of information related to lean, at least weekly. And if you want to connect with me, that's the best way to connect.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
And for our listeners, if you'd like to suggest a guest, ask a question, or give any ideas for episodes or content, you can reach out to me, Keith Norris, on LinkedIn. And this concludes this episode of KPI Fireside, a continuous improvement podcast. If you have enjoyed today's episode, be sure to add a comment, like, follow, subscribe on the socials, and share the podcast with friends or colleagues who are as passionate about continuous improvement as you are. You can find us wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, keep driving progress and sparking change. This episode is brought to you by KPI Fire, the all-in-one platform for continuous improvement. With KPI Fire, you can align strategy, drive execution, and engage your people. So whether you're leading a team or driving enterprise-wide change, KPI Fire helps you deliver real results. Learn more at www.kpifire.com.